But again, don't believe me when it comes to these things. There are scholarly works out there on the subject. I mentioned Maury Terry's fantastic work, Ultimate Evil, but there's also a book called Satan's Power, a Deviant Psychotherapy Cult by W.S. Bainbridge to look into. And by the way, the process's own dossiers and their own declarations, their constitution, so to speak, has been published recently. So it's in book form. Their documents are there for people to also study. You know, slowly as we pass down through the years, more evidence, more information comes out, partly even from their own organization. And scholars need to know about that, so we're not entirely basing, you know, the research on dated information. The interesting thing about their symbolism is that when they first came to America, not only were they using the mascot of the Alsatian dog, the German Shepherd, they were also using clearly the head of Baphomet, the inverted pentagram with the goat's head. That was their logo. And therefore it's interesting that then you start seeing this logo appear all over the place from that point on. And we know we've seen it, but it actually originated with the Process Church, by the way, and then got picked up by Anton LaVey and others. And it's also rumored that the cult, when they did arrive, they arrived just in time for the so-called Summer of Love period in San Francisco, using this goat of Mendez image. Mendez being a place in Egypt, an ancient city. And then this goat head, as I say, is observed even in ad copy in the media. The Process Church was also closely affiliated with the Hells Angels, especially the Santa Cruz Hills group, themselves deeply involved in all sorts of murder for hire and satanic murder cults. This is documented, well known. And in fact, one could say that the entire 60s countercultural era was a deliberate mind control ritual, basically, involving the hippies and the Hells Angels. And again, with these selected impresarios, the selected people's champions to make it all kosher and cool. If you read the book, very interesting book called Saucer Full of Secrets, it's the official biography of Pink Floyd. You'll find some very interesting information in there about how Timothy Leary and his coterie just appeared like magic in London, armed with all their drugs, right in the center. I mean, positioned right in the center of the Chelsea set, the teens and the hippies, the sort of Malcolm McLarens before the Malcolm McLarens. And they were disseminating these drugs not only to the bands, but to the record producers as well, and then getting them embroiled in drug deals so that then they could be compromised. And then once you have those people compromised, the record producers and a lot of the famous record companies we know today, they started off very small, fledgling organizations and groups. And they were compromised easily when they were in that nascent state, so that later on when they became bigger or they merged, those officials were already well and truly compromised, both with drugs and other things. This Timothy Leary, by the way, again, look at the history, look who's behind these people. He was funded by a man called William Mellon Hitchcock of the Mellon dynasty. He's the nephew of Andrew Mellon, and LSD was produced in vast quantity at the estate, the Mellon estate in New York. And Timothy Leary and his gang were affiliated with a group known as the World Psychedelic Institute, which is basically an offshoot of the Fabian Society. And this goes the same for the Black Panthers, the KKK, a lot of different groups that came out have been funded by establishment money. And we have the insider proof. We have the evidence of this. It's not a question of, it's not negotiable. Of course, don't forget that we have the famous Altamont Festival, as we said, the People's Champions, which took place on December 6th, 69, and that's an important date because that is under the 13th sign of the zodiac. A lot of occult rituals happen at a particular period of the zodiac, specifically in December, because that's what's known as the 13th sign of the zodiac, Ophiuchus or Serpentarius, and declarations of war and all sorts of ritual things take place then, as this concert happened in which there was ritual death there. And the symbolism, of course, is very interesting. Jagger is wearing, he's a Leo, so he's wearing the symbol of Leo, but it also doubles up as the symbol of the serpent and as the symbol of Omega, which in occult ritual is always connected to Satan. Talking about the Rolling Stones, and the Altamont Festival was filmed in the movie Gimme Shelter. They went on, of course, to, or maybe it was before, they did the film with entitled Sympathy for the Devil, and that was made by the kooky, crazy Jean-Luc Godard, who's an open card-carrying Marxist, communist, who thinks of himself as a film director. Maybe he should ask Werner Herzog and Werner Fassbinder how to do it. But anyway, now David Berkowitz has emphasized that the control of the church, particularly in Hollywood, was very strong. They had a lot of power over media figures and still do, actors and so on. And the question then arises, you see, as to how much power they had. Or was it de Grimston himself, or was it his wife's? You know, there's still ongoing study in this subject. But the fact remains that Hollywood, they targeted Hollywood and had many followers in Hollywood. And that brings us to the Manson murders, the Helter Skelter period, because that focused on a very well-known group that's known as the Cielo Drive group. You know, LaBianca, the Tate murders, and the Folgers family, and also, of course, the Polanski setup. And as a matter of fact, Vincent Bugliosi also corroborated that Charles Manson was, in fact, connected to the Grimstons and the Process Church. Maury Terry says that when Manson had the Tate murders done, he was not just doing it in some helter-skelter fantasy, but there was a real motive. He said that Manson was working for somebody else when those crimes were committed. He said Manson volunteered to do the killings for someone else. And I put this picture there because we've always, how many years have we seen this famous tattoo on Charles Manson's forehead? From the moment he was arrested and brought into court, he had this, what people imagine as a swastika. Actually, it's not a swastika, because Charles Manson, by his own definition, has had nothing whatever to do with Hell's Angels or hippies, and very adamantly will tell you that he is from an earlier generation and looks at those people as completely clueless. Time after time. So then what is the symbol? That is the symbol of the Process Church, which was in fact a swastika slightly skewed to look like a Malta cross, or a Malta cross slightly skewed to look like a swastika, either way. And that swastika is not the Nazi symbol, and Manson knows it. And this Charles Manson, at the time when he was a musician hanging around in California, San Francisco, the Haight-Ashbury district, Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys and many other people who knew Manson and respected him actually referred to him as the Wizard. That was his code name on the streets because of his occult affiliations. And as I said, this was confirmed by Bugliosi. Bugliosi had, and this is the prosecuting attorney, a real big wig, big honcho in the legal profession, who wrote a book on the whole thing, who wrote the book Helter Skelter. He says that Bugliosi had privately asked Manson if he knew Robert de Grimston, head of the Process. Manson said he had met Moore. "You're looking at him," Manson said. "Moore and I are one and the same." Bugliosi believed that Manson was saying that his ideas mirrored Moore's, but anyone who studied mind control understands what the alter ego is and how this is used in mind control, this form of identification. Woodrow Wilson had it with his alter ego, Colonel Mandel House, and it plays a big role in cult activity. I find that infinitely sinister, that somebody look in your face and say, "I and he are one." Are we in the Doctor Who here or whatever? And of course, no speaking about the Manson killings until leads us to Roman Polanski. And it turned out that David Berkowitz said that the reason why the killings actually took place, as you saw, it wasn't to do with just a mad spree dreamt up by Charles Manson, who burning to death out in the middle of the desert somewhere, or this racial disturbance that everybody says he was trying to inculcate. It actually had to do because all these families living on Cielo Drive were deeply involved not only in drugs but in child pornography. That's the Tate family, the LaBianca family, and the Polanski family, and even Sharon Tate. They were all involved in pedophilia and child pornography. And the Process hit them for internal reasons. And also to send a message to the rest of Hollywood to fall into line that when these guys ask you for a payment for their drug money, you better fall into line, or this is an example of what's going to be happening to you.